All right, we're
Welcome
going.
back. We are Two Beards in a Bible. I'm John Swano,
Dave Tennant.
and you're going to have to tell me. I think we're over chapter 8 of
Chapter.
chapter 8 of First Corinthians.
Are we? Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, we haven't talked about
Yes.
it. Well, together we figured it out.
Yes. We finished chapter 7 finally.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, in the last episode, I was looking for a passage in Ecclesiastes,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back to the reference book where I got that from, and it wasn't Ecclesiastes, it was Ecclesiasticus.
Oh,
Obviously, some Greek.
some other fellow.
Yeah, exactly. So that's I don't even know what to say. Chapter 8. I think it's your turn to read.
Yeah.
And why don't you just read the whole chapter?
All right. Now, concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. For even if there are so-called gods wherever, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. For some, with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge, shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died? But when you thus sin against the brethren, and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble.
Okay. Go back to the first verse. So now there's obviously in this letter that they wrote to Paul, which we learned about at the beginning of chapter 7. Now there's another issue that they had a question about in the letter. Is about things offered to idols.
Yeah.
So I guess ancient culture was that they would have, a temple for Zeus, and then they'd bring in a bunch of cows and they would sacrifice them to Zeus, but they wouldn't throw all that meat away. They'd only burn probably certain parts of it,
Right.
just like the Jews did.
Right.
And then they would butcher the rest of it and sell it.
Right.
And they'd probably keep the temple going.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure there were butcher houses or not meat markets or whatever next to the temple.
No, yeah,
temples
sure.
or whatever,
Or maybe the temple had a meat market in it.
Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, that those sorts of things, don't really mean anything to the Lord, because again, as he says, there's only one God.
Yeah.
So, but you can understand, I suppose, that if you have come out of that, and that's what your knowledge is that you do this and you do it for the sacrifice this beast to this particular God that you have in your mind, and then you come out of that and you are now a Christian, you might well have trouble reconciling the idea of eating something that is kind of connected to perhaps your old ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I can identify with this.
Uh-huh.
I know it like Christmas time.
Right.
If somebody was to say lead a bunch of Christmas songs in the assembly, on Christmas morning, it would probably offend me,
Right.
because that was something that I came out of,
Right.
So maybe that makes me the weak brother,
Mm-hmm.
but I can still understand it.
Yeah. Come Christmas time or any of the holidays that we find in the religious world, um, we oftentimes find no mention of it in the
Right.
Lord's church, and rather on purpose. I mean, this past Christmas, Christmas Day came and went, and I'm preaching sermons, and it didn't even cross my mind,
Yeah.
and I know that we had visitors on Christmas that I think were probably expecting a Christmas sermon, but
Yeah.
didn't get it. And but it would, for my conscience sake, I would probably avoid preaching anything having to do with the birth of Christ on Christmas Day.
Right.
It's just not that there'd be anything wrong with that,
Right.
but for me, I would want to distance myself from what it's turned into.
Yeah.
In the world, whether right or wrong.
Right.
That's
yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
So he says, we know that we all have knowledge, and knowledge puffs up. Does that really work that way, John?
Yeah. 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 In just about every case.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. He says, but love edifies. Right? So he's just contrasting.
Yeah. Love builds up.
Yeah.
You kind of think of, if someone has all the knowledge, they're telling you, well, this is what I'm telling you, this is what I know, and this is what you have to do. But love, teaches people and builds them up.
Yeah.
And says, take a look at this, let's learn together.
Right.
And that's an art form, isn't it? To be able to teach.
Yes.
And to edify at the same time. It is something that we all have to strive for.
I think there's some parallels in this here with Romans chapter 14, don't you?
Yeah.
Because he addresses this kind of issue there as well.
Right. I'm going to go there for the refreshing of my memory.
Yeah. What are the things he talks about there?
Verse 19, I'm looking at it because I underlined it at some point. Therefore, let us pursue the things which make for peace, and the things by which one may edify another.
Yeah.
Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food.
Yeah.
All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for the man who eats with offense.
Yeah. So
it kind of goes right in line with what we're talking about.
Yeah, really, this kind of Paul's addressing kind of a similar issue as he addressed there. Mm-hmm. There's some problems with people eating things sacrificed to idols.
So this is nothing new, and throughout across the churches at this time, they're dealing with a lot of the same issues.
Right, and it's interesting. He talks about knowledge, and can we have knowledge that's wrong?
Yeah,
yeah, and I think there's some of that going on too.
Yeah,
that's kind of why I think part of the reason he says some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He says, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know.
Right.
And that's what he's going to address here. He says, but if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. So
and again, going back to the way that we talk to others, it speaks to humility.
Yeah.
Even in the knowledge that we have in the scriptures. That can be turned into something that puffs people up.
Yeah. Verse 4, therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols. Okay. So that's a question. We know that an idol is nothing in the world and that there's no other God but one. So Paul just lays out, this is what the truth of all this is. That these idols that this stuff was sacrificed to are not real.
Right.
It's fake.
Yeah.
And there's only one God. So,
and verse 5 is not a contradiction. He says, for even if there are so-called gods, and small g,
Yes.
whether in heaven, small h, or on
Yes.
earth, as there are many gods, small g, and many lords, small l. There are people work up in their mind,
Yeah.
that there are these things, and he's saying, well, even if, it's of no consequence.
He says, yet for us, there is one God,
Mm-hmm.
the Father, of whom all things, of are all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we are all things, and through whom we live. So, yeah.
That statement kind of makes me think of, he's trying to bring their minds around to what is important.
Right.
Because you could get caught up on all the different gods, small g. You could get caught up in that conversation about those things. And really, all you really need to realize is, well, let's forget about that. Let them have whatever they got.
Yeah, and he says, but even if there were, for us, there's only one.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to talk about it.
Right.
Right. So that's the setup. Verse 7. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. So not everybody understands that fact.
Right.
Some people think there are many gods.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's possible for someone to have been obedient to Christ, and their knowledge just hasn't reached the point where they understand all these things.
Absolutely.
And just to mention, there are those today that believe that they have to be perfect before they are obedient to the gospel.
Right.
And this is further proof that that's not the case.
No.
That you still learn. You're still getting to know things, even after you are obedient to the gospel.
It says, however, there is not in everyone that knowledge. For some, with consciousness of the idol, until now, eat it as a thing offered to an idol. So there were some who still regarded that idol as an idol.
Or at the very least, they had been involved in the worship of, or the service of that idol. And so in their mind, it says until now. So I would take that to mean they're not doing it anymore.
So I would take it to mean as they're still doing it.
Oh, see,
they're doing it still. Now they're still doing it. From the starting point until now, they've been doing this.
Yeah. I never read it that way. I always thought of it as until now. So there's a cessation of that. And, their conscience being weak, not fully understanding all things.
Yeah.
When they go to eat this meat, they might realize, well, it was offered over here and I've left that. That's the way that I would think of it.
He says, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I don't know exactly.
We probably have a lot of experts listening, so they
probably do have a lot of experts listening.
They can weigh in with us.
Yeah, so I mean, you could read it this way that that they're still doing it, and maybe they know that it's not quite right.
Let's see what these fellas say.
Okay,
about
what verse is that?
Verse 7. Chapter 8, verse 7.
It says the supposed conflict between verse 1 and verse 7 has brought several different explanations from commentators. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Right? Not a bit. Though the Corinthians claimed that we have all knowledge, and the fact that they were having problems proved that they did not all know what they needed to know. We kind of said that. Indeed, the latter part of the verse, but some, being accustomed to the idol, eat until now, eat food as if it were sacrificed to an idol, and are conscious of being weak is defiled. That's a New American Standard Version. Indicates the deficiency of the knowledge of some. No doubt, all Christians would admit that there is only one God and that idols have no real existence. But this monotheistic knowledge possessed by all had not yet unfolded its full consequences in the conscience of all. The Corinthians were like the superstitious among Christians today, who shun the number 13, read their astrology charts, etc., while disclaiming belief in any supernatural power other than Jehovah. For some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered to the idol. So the AV follows the Textus Receptus reading of, I'm not going to try to pronounce that Greek word, which means conscience. The better manuscripts for further reading being of becoming accustomed to. The idea is that the weak Christians had become accustomed to eating meat sacrificed to idols in the past. Although they would admit the existence of only one God, they still ate the food offered to idols as an act of worship. 2, they considered anyone else who ate food sacrificed to idols to be doing the same thing.
Interesting. So it's kind of both.
Could be.
It kind of speaks both ways, but it does sort of say there that that they said it in the past, but then it goes on and says that they do it that they still ate the food offered to idols as an act of worship, which is interesting. So were they bringing over a practice from the previous religion and trying to incorporate it into Christianity?
I guess that's one way you can look at this.
I mean, all kinds of groups have done that. So, but I guess here's the crux of it. They considered anyone else who they considered that anyone else who ate the food was also doing it for the same reasons, which
was totally wrong.
Which then would, and they seem to understand that was in some way.
Yeah.
Or are they talking about it, building up that idea in their heads that you should do this thing? Well, so that's the reason not to do it.
Verse 8 says, "But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, or if we do not eat are we the worse."
Yeah. I think it continues, but beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? So it's giving the appearance that this is something that you do as a Christian, and they're equating it for those reasons, even though the Christian with liberty would not be eating it for those reasons.
Right.
So it's
they would make a wrong assumption.
Yeah.
The interesting thing here is, he says, "But beware lest how this becomes a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you have knowledge eating the idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat these things?" Here's the key verse: "And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died." There's another verse that talks about the ability of somebody to lose their salvation.
Right. As it would be, you can take from that, you necessarily infer that it would be wrong for them to eat that as worship, because it's worship that God hasn't asked for.
Yeah.
That's well, we learned something there.
That's interesting.
I think I'll take myself as standing half corrected. Half to 3/4.
I wasn't sure either way, so
it makes sense. I think whoever wrote this helped us out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Who wrote this book?
Got to look inside the cover, I think.
Oh, I think it's one of the Willis wrote. Mike Willis.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. It says, "But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ." Then you can sin against the brethren,
causing them to stumble.
Yep, absolutely.
It brings to mind when Jesus speaks of causing children to stumble.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be better. It would be better that a millstone be tied around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. Have I got that
absolutely.
in the right place there?
Yeah. He says, "Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat again unless I make my brother stumble." So I guess we've got to be careful with these sorts of things.
Yeah. And it's, think of that today, how many things do we do in our lives that we have liberty to do, and it never, ever crosses our mind that someone else could be thinking about it in that way. I mean, I've had situations in my life, not necessarily in the church, but in my life where I've done something and someone thought something of it, and I never would have put my mind in that direction.
Yeah.
Like I was shocked that they thought that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of puts an onus on us to, as Christians, to kind of know where our brethren are in their thinking, and to be close to them, to understand a little bit about them, so that we can protect each other and protect the weak among us.
Yeah. And if we're going to do that, we got to know each other, right?
Yeah. There's all the more reason to be a family in the church.
Yeah.
And not just people we see once a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't get to know each other
Right.
sitting at home, right? You have to take some action to get
and
to know.
And it takes work. I mean, I can remember when Angela and I joined the church when we were baptized. It took, I'm going to guess, and this, we were in a large group, 200 plus people in the assembly, and it took us 3-4 years to where we actually felt close to a group of people.
Yeah.
And a part of it's our shyness.
Yeah.
But the other part of it,
I don't believe that.
It's a group of people.
Your shyness.
No, you don't know me very well. There are most of my school teachers, if they found out that I spoke in front of people on a regular basis, they wouldn't believe it.
Oh.
but it takes time, and it's a two-way street. As you enter into the church, you have to make an effort to get to know people, and we should likewise, for new people that come in amongst us, we should welcome them and bring them in and make them part of the family.
It's certainly one of the qualifications of being an elder, right?
Yeah.
You got to know the
be
flock.
Hospitable.
Yeah, you have to be hospitable.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. Well, John, I guess we're going to cut this one short.
Okay. Got too much in the next section.
Well, chapter 9 is almost the whole way through. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining in.
Yeah, we'll let you off easy this time.
Yeah. I guess you have an extra cup of coffee or something. We'll see you next time.